Now, we are ready to start the very first lecture, Technique as the Culture Form, Making Xiyang in Suzhou Prints by Dr. Yu-chih LAI. Dr. LAI, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for Aoki-san's introduction and also the hospitality of the museum and everything. And so today I shall have, present it in Chinese, but for some reason, okay, today I will just conduct it in English. So my title is Techniques as a Cultural Form, Making Xiyang in Suzhou Print. The influence of Europe or European-inspired styles has undoubtedly played an important role in the transformation of Chinese painting since the late Ming period. However, the meanings of European-ness, the meaning of the European-ness, which here included the term Xiyang or Taixi, also refer to West, and how this European-ness and its styles were represented in such a is much more complicated than we thought. The common assumption that it equates a European style. The common assumption that equate a European style with the application of linear perspective you can see here, or use of shadowing and modeling, like this, and so on. While not entirely incorrect, is a simplified modern perception. When encountering the same piece of European artwork, how a so-called Western style of techniques was perceived, comprehended, and even recreated for or by the Chinese in the past should have varied from person to person, region to region, and period to period, and so on. In other words, the elements that define the so-called West in any visual world are not objectively quantifiable, but rather culturally factors. Therefore, this presentation will take the Suzhou print with inscriptions that indicate their direct imitation or emulation of a so-called European style, inscription which would either read that in imitation of the brushwork of Taixi or imitation of the tone of Xiyang, and so on, as a kind of starting point to analyze how the characteristics of Westernness were defined and comprehended subjectively. Most importantly, this presentation argues that it is not just the manifestation of a new visual effects, but the new techniques employed in the process of making that denote the desired foreign-ness in the Suzhou print. Okay. Suzhou print and the Qing court. There has been significant research on the European style present in Suzhou prints. Among many issues discussed, the relationship between Suzhou print and imperial court painting is considered one of the most noteworthy focal points. Due to their similarity in the use of a Western perspective and composition, some scholars argue that European style in Suzhou print should have originated from the Qing court. However, Wang Zhenhua cited evidence from sources such as missionary records to prove that imported European copperplate prints had also been circulating in the Jiangnan region. This suggests that the Western style in Suzhou print may not necessarily have been introduced by the Qing court. We indeed know the porcelain produced from the Mingyao or non-official kiln in Jingdezhen use numerous European copperplate prints as a kind of pictorial model. For example, you can see this one here. The export place, the image actually is from the engraving from Amsterdam. The engraving actually is after Rubens' painting on the right. This last possibility that Suzhou print could have drawn directly from the European copperplate print circulating in Jiangnan without the need for the coarse inference. However, while the Western style or technique in Suzhou print may have been inspired by the copperplate print, and while the emphasis on presenting the West may have differed from the course, we cannot automatically consider that the Qing Court and Jiangnan region are separate. Therefore, to understand how these Suzhou prints understood and represented the so-called West, while their understanding may not be identical to the Qing Court, using the materials and resources available from the court can still provide a valuable context and a comparative framework. Occidental taste from the Kangxi period to the Qianlong period. So, how did the court perceive Western influence? What forms of expression were considered so-called West or Western? They are undoubtedly complex questions that cannot be answered comprehensively, but we can gain some insight by examining a few cases. In as early as in the reign of Kangxi Emperor, there are European Jesuit painters such as Giardini, or Nian Yunlong in Chinese, and Matteo Ripa, Ma Guoxian in Chinese working at the court. But even before the arrival of European painters, core artists like Zhao Bingzhen had already been incorporating a Western style into their artwork. Nevertheless, by the late Kangxi period, the adoption of the so-called Western techniques has become the mainstream. By the late Kangxi period, the adoption of the especially in the artwork commissioned by the Kangxi Emperor himself. He even tried to encourage and train the Han Chinese literati painters surrounding him, such as Jiang Tingxi, to learn the Western style way of painting. For example, the painting here you can see on the left is the work done by Jiang Tingxi, and the right is done by a Giardini student at the court. So basically Kangxi Emperor ordered both of them painting the same ginseng plane in a palace. So that is the way to train Jiang Tingxi to learn how to painting in the Western style. As one of the Kangxi's closest high officials, Jiang Tingxi became very interested in employing the Western technique in the work around the 15 years of Kangxi reign, that is around 1711. His piece, around the period, he actually made a lot of big set of albums, like you can see here. The left one is the album of birds done by Jiang Tingxi. So you can see that he used this kind of Western modeling effect to get this kind of volume or texture of the chicken or hen. And the right is another album also done by the Jiang Tingxi group or his team. And his painting that entitled Peony, which is dated to 1718, held in the collection of Palace Museum in Beijing, clearly indicates in his inscription that the painting is a playful study of Western modeling and smudging techniques. 细学海西烘染法. In this case, the Westernness defined by Jiang Tingxi is not about the often mentioned linear perspective, but the capacity to model and smudge, a characteristics that can be also observed in other works around the same period of time by he and his team. The example of Jiang Tingxi merely illustrates one aspect of the Qing Court's understanding of Western painting. So why did Kangxi Emperor appreciate Western painting? Our knowledge of this is rather limited. We only know that Kangxi once said, quote, Westerners excel at portraiture, even capturing the exquisite essence of the great ancient Chinese painter Gu Kaizhi, unquote. And continue to say that they are especially adept at creating, quote, realistic portrait, 写的冰针. In contrast to the scarcity of the material from the Emperor Kangxi and Emperor Yongzheng themselves concerning the definition of Western style painting, why they were appreciated and which aspects should be emulated, the Emperor Qianlong was much more revealing. Many of his personal insights on this question can be found in his imperial poetry. First, he believed that the Western painting involved a concave and convex brushwork techniques, 凹凸丹青法, which excel in depicting the undulating surface of object and can be traced back to the tradition of Tang painting, Tang Dynasty painter Wei Chi Yizhen. Additionally, Qianlong Emperor admired the Western perspective for its ability to create the illusion of spatial depth and consider it more, quote, true and vivid, 真切, when compared to traditional Chinese methods. Finally, similar to Kangxi Emperor, he also acknowledged the strength of Western painting in creating, quote, unusual resemblance, 奇效, unquote. But he did propose that ideal painting should combine, quote, the rhythm of Li Gongling, unquote, the yun, with the resemblance of Castilian, unquote. With this in mind, there is an apparent shift from selectively embracing the capacity of Western visuality to consciously and actively moderating and creating a localized, quote, Westernness, unquote. In the style of Western brushwork, if the court define Western painting through terms such as resemblance, or realism, 逼真, it appeared that Suzhou Ubra print artists had a similar understanding of Western style. In Han Huaide's Ubra print entitled Herding a Bull in the Forest, which has been studied by Dr. Wang Jilin in Rice Museum, he pointed out this print was partially based on a 17th century Dutch print. The artist explicitly mentioned in the inscription that it was created in the tone of West, 法泰西比意, and also emphasized in the lengthy inscription that it followed the orthodox method of the West, 中西正法. Therefore, he asserts that his work can capture the vitality of nature and convey the subtlety of human expression, 物夺深情，人传妙态. This implies a sense of vividness and immediacy. Now, knowing that both court and local Suzhou artists believe that Western techniques could achieve the qualities including realism, 逼真, and true vividness, 真切, and unusual resemblance, 奇效, we can turn our attention to which painting techniques could produce such effect. Much research has been conducted to the core painting, so we will not delve into that here. But what about Suzhou Ubra print? What design elements set them apart from the traditional Chinese painting or prints and created a kind of distinctive impression of the Westernness for the viewer? The most well-known example are explicitly mentioned their imitation of Western techniques are the Bridge of the 10,000 Years to Come in Suzhou, 姑苏万年桥, and the picture of 1,000 children by Zitu, both of which were published by the Zhang Jinju workshop. Both prints bear inscription that respectively states in the style of Western brushstroke from Xiyang 笔法 and in the brush tone of West from Taixi 笔意. The first, as its name suggested, depict the bridge of 10,000 years to come of the 万年桥, which was completed in the 1740, just a year before the print itself, along with the bustling commercial scene surrounding it. The composition portrays numerous shops selling various kinds of goods, which make a reminiscence of the popular Suzhou commercial painting that entitled Along the River during the Qingming Festival, 清明上河图. The biggest difference, however, is that the figure in the bridge, in the bridge prints that we can see here, mostly are official and their entourage, rarely commons. But you can see in the painting version, the commercial paintings, that you can see a lot of very interesting comments. Here, here. A lot of, in addition to officials and their entourage, there are also a lot of different kinds of aspects of daily life. Picture of 100 children portrays festive scene of children playing in the garden with magnificent buildings, and its composition bring to mind the four 睡朝图 or first day of the New Year's painting discussed by Professor Chen Baozhen in Taida, two of which actually involve a Songjiang painter Chen Mei, and especially the one you can see here actually is also painting by Chen Mei and also some of other colleagues. Chen Mei entered the palace in 1726 during the reign of Yongzheng Emperor and was involved in the production of the court's famous version of Along the River during the Qiming Festival painting. He continued to serve the palace until the early years of Qianlong reign and afterward. He retired to the Jiangnan region due to his eye problem. In the daily operation record of the workshop in the Imperial Household Department in 1762, it shows that Qianlong was even suspicious that Chen Mei took the draft of the along the river during the Qiming Shanghe to along the river during the Qiming festival with him when he returned to the south, a suspicion which prompted investigation. Whether true or not, this indicates the flow of artisans as well as their draft, prints, and drawing between the court and the Jiangnan region are likely quite vibrant. The similarity in the style between Suzhou print, the picture of 1,000 children, and of course, New Year's morning painting might suggest a possible connection to the painter with core experience like Chen Mei, a topic should be worth further exploration. Painting versus print. So now how do this Suzhou Wu-block print, which claim to adopt a Western technique, actually demonstrated their Westernness? The most obvious aspect, of course, is the use of perspective. You can see here, just like the coal painting, similar to the coal painting. However, unlike paintings which can employ color shading and modeling to depict the texture, like the one in Castiglione paintings, and European prints, especially the copper clay engraving, rely primarily on the intersecting parallel line or hatching to convey shadows and create a sense of three-dimensionality. For example, you can see on the left, in the two work of the bridge and the children, we can also observe the use of similar technique to depict the dark area and shadow despite being Wu-block print. In the bridge of the 10,000 years to come in Suzhou, the artists deploy high mechanical and accurately parried horizontal lines or great line to depict the sky, the water ripples, the bridge piers, and the interior shadows, all of which clearly emulate the European copper plate prints. You can see here, parallel and gray line are also used to present color and structure, such as the city wall and the rooftop you can see on the right. In this regard, apart from the variation in density, there is not much difference between the traditional Chinese printmaking practice like the one on the left. While the use of parallel line to depict the sky and the cloud is a kind of common practice in the European print on the right. In this particular work, the artist add flower-shaped clouds, which are reminiscent of the auspicious and celestial motif in the Chinese painting tradition. This gives the bridge of 10,000 years to come in Suzhou prints a certain auspiciousness, a highly political overtone in the Chinese visual tradition. It is worth noting that in early European copper print, particularly those from Germany and Italy, hatching is a kind of typical executed with a very strict parallel line, like the one on the left, a technique which results in figures that appear rather rigid and stiff. However, by the 16th century, significant improvement has been made in this regard. Engravers began to systematically incorporating curving lines around the lips and trunk of the figure to create an idealized body like the one on the right. And many new techniques were introduced to advance the development of printmaking toward the naturalism, like the one on your right. The old school is the one on your left, more rigid, and this kind of use curved line to depict the contour And the shadowing on the right is a more like a new technique after the 16th century. For example, the one on the right by Cornese's court, who was from Netherlands but worked in Italy in his later year, developed the techniques known as the swellende tali, that is German. So basically means the swelling green lines. This entailed the line become longer and being engraved with varying thickness. When combined with additional dotting and stippling, copperplate print could convey a sense of three-dimensionality as well as texture and color. By the early 18th century, when Suzhou opera print were gaining popularity, the technique of European copperplate prints had already become highly sophisticated. So you can see here, in terms of engraving alone, numerous combinations of different parallel lines could represent various surface quality. In other words, the line and dots in European copperplate print primarily serve to depict specific light and shadow effect, as well as textures, therefore possessing a kind of representational quality. However, in the Suzhou opera print, the line does not entirely serve this purpose. For example, some area of the bridge of 10,000 years to come in Suzhou from 1741 depicts shadow by employing parallel lines and a line with different kind of density. But inconsistent light sources can be found throughout the composition. And the picture of 1,000 children from 1743, most of the hatching line derived from the European copperplate print, except in few small areas, do not fulfill the representational purpose. Instead, the dense, parallel or grid line are employed to create rich and intricate patterns, which results in an over lively and decorative appearance of the print. And this kind of very decorative and intricate pattern can also see in the in the core painting around the the core painting that produced and done in the Qianlong's Imperial Workshop on the right. This kind of very kind of intricate and decorative nature of the artwork. You can see all this effort has been put to deliver the kind of very fine and very intricate detail of the windows, flowers, and the texture of different surfaces. So basically, the painting and the print share very similar quality and nature in the Qianlong period. This experience of a light, exemplified based by 1745 picture of 1,000 children. The relationship between Suzhou print and the court seems to be a new development during the reign of Qianlong. The defining characteristic of this new trend is almost complete evasion of the depiction of shadow, our effective shadow and shading. The use of cross-hatching akin to copperplate engraving is no longer employed to portray the volume or chiaroscuro of object, but was instead to use in a kind of highly decorative manner to enhance the intricate detail of the image, all of which evoke a sense of kind of complicated craftsmanship. If we trace back the relation between Suzhou print and the court prior to the Qianlong reign, older print from the time of Yongzheng, such as Lian Changgong, and the gate of Suzhou, Guzhou, Changmen, to bear similarities to the painting like 12 months Sheyuan to from the Yongzheng reign in terms of perspective and the composition. There still exist differences in aspects such as the use of a light and shadow. Even earlier, during the reign of Kangxi Emperor, neither painting nor print produced by the court exhibit a particular profound connection to Suzhou print. For example, the print you can see here, Lady in the Attic, a print from the Kangxi reign produced by the publisher Ding Laixuan, which was exported to Dresden in as early as 1720s, remarkably lady in the attics, welcomed the representation of shadow and shadowing, and the density of his parallel cross-hatching lines directly correlate with the chiaroscuro of the object rather than merely serving as a decorative filler. All of these characteristics then were a highly dramatic sense of light and shadow. Similar expression can be also observed in Ding Yuntai's 西湖行宫图 and also Guan Lian's 阿房宫图 produced in the Kangxi period. Both Ding and Guan's family were Catholic family from Changzhou. Their treatment of distinct mountain with simple silhouette outline remind us the Southern Song landscape painting. Are drawn with spells parallel line of vary in thickness to depict the contrasting aspect of the mountain. These distant mountains, while seemingly unstated and simple on the surface, offer significant variety in the length and thickness and the intersections of lines, even evoking the Suavente tali that we mentioned earlier. This suggests the painter and the painter and engraver had a certain understanding of the richness of the European copperplate engraving in terms of how different cross-hatching techniques could be used to depict chiaroscuro. The relation between the cross-hatching and chiaroscuro of object can be seen in the 1734 print, The Gate of Suzhou, 古书昌门图 in the 1734, as well as in the Bridge of 10,000 Years to Come in Suzhou of 1741, which still contain representations of shadow. However, such representation become almost invisible afterward. If present, they are rather stiff, sporadic, and formulated, and lack a credible sense of chiaroscuro, ultimately render the overall image to be very, very flat. For example, in the image of 1,000 children, or the image of the Shui Jing Gong on your right, their hatching appear quite formulated and does not necessarily correlate with the dimension or volume or chiaroscuro of the object portrayed, or even the four concubines. So you can see here, the hatching, for example, on the hatching on the right, cover all over the floor and also the wall. And it takes a lot of craftsmanship and time to do this kind of intricate patterns that actually does not correlate to any kind of spatial visual effect or volume depiction. It's mainly very kind of flat. It's precisely this kind of trend of treating densely packed line as Western techniques that characterize the rather strict formalization of Suzhou print during and after the break of Tianlong period. A conclusion coda. Now we can turn to the initial question, our initial question. What exactly does Western techniques signify in the world of Suzhou print? Secondly, what effects do artists and viewers wish to achieve with these kind of Western techniques? As discussed, aside from perspective, the adoption of parallel hatching to emulate copperplate engraving is a significant feature of Suzhou print, a feature that is absent from the coarse imitation of Western method in both painting and printmaking. Interestingly, during the Qianlong reign and beyond, once hatching in Suzhou print lost its function and modeling object, thus only retained as a kind of decorative role. Was hatching still considered Western techniques by the author of Suzhou prints? What is a rule of the so-called Western method that has lost its ability to create illusion and a sense of three-dimensionality? Taking the print, so you can see that like the imperial print here. I mean, although still have some sense of the perspective, Western perspective, but actually doesn't have any kind of hatching as we can see in the Suzhou print. Taking the print of the Shantang Puqi to Qiao as an example, its inscription clearly states it's an imitation Western brushwork. Although the work is undated, it's merely partial shadow on the bridge pier, and the over clarity of the depiction suggests it is a piece from the early Qianlong period. Notable, the distal mounted and its words are rendered as a rendered kind of silhouette like a triangle, which reminiscent of the style of Ding of one's family workshop of the time of Kangxi period. However, a closer look of his hatching revealed nearly parallel and pattern line, which are devoid of any reference to the structure of the mountain. This is a kind of hallmark of stylized approach in the post-Qianlong era. So superficially, it looks very similar to the Kangxi print, but there's no sense of structure of the mountain. It's very, very flat. So it's a very typical Qianlong period. Even without the ability to model object, this densely parallel line restore the image with a sense of meticulously crafted detail, a characteristic absent in traditional Chinese print. This brings to mind the reaction of Wang Dao, a literati from Shanghai in the later half of the 19th century, when he encountered the volume of Chinese painting manual. A Chinese painting manual entitled Collection of Painting from the Xiyang Pavilion, dated 1884, which was printed in Japan with copper plate engraving. He commented, "This brush is nevertheless good enough, but what makes people linger over and over again is its intricate engraving." In other words, the central attraction is actually the craftsmanship of this refined, very, very refined carving. It's not the painting itself. Return to the Suzhou print. The technique of densely packed parallel line developed from the European copper plate engraving was originally intended for a naturalistic visual effect. By the time of Qianlong reign, however, it more so resembled a showcase of engravers' finely crafted skill. To mimic such dedicated dense line with woodblock engraving is indeed a significant challenge, and perhaps it was the primary selling point of the Western technique in Suzhou print. Interestingly, woodblock print produced in the Qinghuo workshop seem to pay little attention to this development, started from the reign of Kangxi. Even in the case you can see here, the woodblock print and copper plate print of the work entitled Iron Summer Palace, which share the same draft of the woodblock print, does not, which share the same draft. The woodblock print in the center and the right, you can see, does not attempt to mimic the parallel line of the copper plate engraving on the left. So you can see the water part is all totally blank, so leaving the water surface blank. In conclusion, techniques serve not only as a means to accomplish an artistic undertaking or style, but it's also a cultural emblem within the framework of Sino-European exchanges. Hatching, a technique utilized in European copper plate engraving to create volume and shadow, gradually deviated from its original purpose within the world of Suzhou printmaking. Nevertheless, it has emerged as a defining characteristic of the Western-ness embedded in Suzhou print, albeit with a shifting in emphasis away from its representational quality towards the intricate craftsmanship exhibited by the woodblock print cover. Consequently, technique quote, exemplified by the so-called Western technique described today, does not operate as a kind of neutral media, but instead assume a pivotal role as a kind of significant cultural form. Thank you very much.